Yeah, again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends. It's a pleasure to open the second day morning session of our joint bonus forum and triple meeting. Participation is, as yesterday, our project coordinators, advisory board, steering committee, and key stakeholders. My name is Fritz Köster. I'm presently the chair of the bonus steering committee. Before starting with the day's program, I would like to say that we are live streaming the event. Not that you should hold back with any comments. The main information is stick to the microphone. The meeting will commence with a keynote by Dr. Patrice Bockholt on policy and evaluation challenges on public-to-public partnership. Dr. Patrice Bockholt is Managing Director of the Technopolis Group. That's a European consultancy specializing in science, research, and innovation policies. She has worked on European research policies for over 20 years, conducting studies and taking part in European expert groups and supporting policy learning and training. Patrice has acted as rapporteur of the expert group that was actually for the first time elaborating the concept of joint programming and ERANETs as instruments for a possible new direction for European research policies. Since then, she has conducted impact assessments and midterm evaluations of several P2P instruments, and her talk is very relevant for us, even if it is broader than bonus or an Article 185, but addresses the whole suite of EU public-to-public partnership instruments. And that is because there is little doubt that we will see a discussion on these instruments with respect to the launching of FP9. So her talk will give us an idea on which basics the discussion will be conducted. And I think I will ask Patrice to join us here.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I'm very honored to be sharing with you your 10-year anniversary of Bonus. And I said I'll talk a bit about the context of P2Ps. Now, if the first lesson, if you want to understand European policy, you have to tackle with a lot of acronyms. So P2P stands for public-to-public partnerships. What I will address today is understanding a bit in a historical context, the rationales of these partnerships in a bigger context of the European research area. And also to how we think about the impacts of these type of policies, and how we think about these impacts has changed quite a lot if you look over the whole history of framework programs. A big concept also in thinking about what do these instruments make sense is thinking about European added value. The concept, what does Europe add value to these instruments and collaborations has also changed quite a lot over time, and it has an impact also on these public-private partnerships. Now, traditional evaluations of research and innovation policy already is challenging. You know, we usually are asked to evaluate programs or institutes, and then you have a very neat set of projects and a program with a quite clear focus, and then already it's very difficult to evaluate that. I would like to say something about how even more challenges come into the play when we talk about these public-to-public partnerships. It makes it even more complex. I'll talk about the state of play of the evaluation and say something about the future of partnerships and instruments and their evaluation. Now, I said the ERA instruments, the ERA nets already started in FP6, so that was before a more thinking about joint programming of aligning national and EU research came to play. But this green paper in 2007 really started to develop the ideas of why Europe should, the member states together with the European Commission should really coordinate their policies. And I remember very well it was during the Netherlands presidency in 2004. The Director General of DG RTD at that point was Mr. Mitsos, a Greek person, and he was very. There was a meeting of ERAP at the time. He was very almost frustrated and angry, and he said, "Well, you member states, you expect so much of us, the European Commission, in setting direction, in helping to set the agenda, to reform policy of the research area. But we, the European Commission, only have 5% of the complete R&D funds in the public R&D funds in all of Europe. You, the member states, you, the regions, you have 95%. So don't just look at us. Please come to the party and help us align and help us coordinate, because you have the 95%. And in order to leverage what the European Commission can do, we need the member states just don't need to look at this framework program and the money that comes from there, but also start rethinking their own, their national and their regional programs. And particularly with these societal challenges that go way beyond the national capacities of one region or one country. So it was then when the discussion started that it shouldn't be the Commission doing Commission programs with their instruments, the countries doing their programs with their instruments. It should be really more aligned with each other. And define what are the societal challenges that we as Europe can cope with much better together. It changed the governance pattern of EU, because as the member states, they had their programs. No one was interfering, as it were, in how that was run, how it was managed, how it was evaluated. Every member state did their thing. The European Commission had their instruments. There were, of course, the program committees and so forth that were influencing them, but it was quite two very different worlds. And in the start of this thinking about public-to-public partnerships, the European Commission, but also the member states, wanted a much closer involvement of these national research funders, that they have a bigger say in where European research policy would go. So that meant also that the strategies need to be aligned across borders. And there was quite some debate about why are we doing this? And one of the bigger arguments always said, well, together we have more critical mass. And the scientist says, yeah, but who needs critical mass? We're not really competing with each other, it's fine as it is. But the other policy argument was, well, there's far too much fragmentation. There's all these little programs here, in this country, in that country. We're all doing similar things. If we align that, we might have better agendas, and therefore also higher quality research as a result. So that was sort of the big thinking, and that's only 10 years ago. So here we are, 2017. I think you are one of the good examples where what has happened as a result. Since this era thinking, the agenda setting function of research has really been more explicit. Before the Commission, the role was this European added value it went from the philosophy of subsidiarity. Everyone at the best level could do what they can best do. So we do projects when they are big scale, where it makes sense to do that together. But also, if you look at the framework programs and the instruments that are created, there's more and more ambition and a bigger role for doing things together, also doing things for the European Commission to not only do science projects, but seize opportunities to be leading industrial in the world, to be at the forefront of various science areas, domains, to be ahead of countries like US and so forth. So those sort of bigger ambitions to do things as Europe became, well, it was clear on the agenda, and that meant that we have to have a sort of more common agenda in research programming. Of course, there was also a lot of criticism. It sounded for the science community very much as a sort of top-down, you tell us what to do, but it was more about also defining themes, particularly in the societal challenge areas, in the grand challenges, where research should help bring solutions. So this also changed the way that the research, actually doing research was governed, because before you had a program, say it was the European Commission or a member state who would set the scene, set the agenda, and then people could ask for grants. In this new thinking, there is also a much more sort of supporting of self-governing coalitions, consortia, groups like Bonus, bringing together partners, stakeholders, funders, research communities to set the agenda themselves, to define what they want to do and how they want to do it. So the governance of research policy seems to be shifting, not just from the policymakers from their desks, but more to these consortia with a very complex set of stakeholders who jointly define what is going to be done. So you see that also within the European Commission that there is a more policy formulating part of the Commission, and more thematic directorates that are more executing policies that are set by multiple stakeholders. And also they're thinking of European added value change. Well, it's too small to read for you apparently, but we mapped out from FP1, that's very long ago, to FP8, Horizon 2020 didn't fit in the box, so we call it FP8 for the... So thinking about what does the Commission bring to the party in research policy has really changed from, starting from, if it has to be big scale, we will be involved in the first framework program, to sort of uniform standards, and it shifted much more in FP6, FP7 to contribute to these societal challenges, but also restructuring the research landscape, restructuring the funding landscape, restructuring how policy is made. And the very last element of this European added value is something that came in much more strongly in Horizon 2020. It's also to jointly define how we are going to collaborate with what we call third countries, which are the countries outside Europe. There's a bigger action now in together, not as every country bilaterally, but together as European, to speak with one voice how we interact with the United States or with Latin America or with Asia. So Europe and the European policy has become a much more influential factor in also how we deal with research and science in our member states and regions. If we think about an impact, this has also changed a lot in the last decade. If we were usually asked to do an evaluation of a program or a research program or a research institute, traditionally it would be a very sort of short-term looking back, and you have a bonus program and it's sort of 10 ways going, and then you look back at the projects that have been launched in such a program. Now, typically, policymakers would ask us to look, okay, what are the scientific impacts from projects A, B, C, D? We would like to, if it's more applied research, we want to know, have the patents been created? If it's even more industrially oriented, policymakers want to know, well, did it bring us any, economic impact? How many jobs are created? That's sort of a very sort of clear targets that they want to know. And usually it's done very quickly after a project or a program has ended. So you always have to say, well, this is very difficult because, impacts are very long term. You cannot say that immediately, and the things like jobs and economic impact are very difficult to attribute to a particular science or a technology project. I said that the part of what European policy is trying to do is to organize this community formation and setting together networks and platforms and so forth. Well, how do you evaluate that? That is also quite something which if you look at the long term is quite different than if you look immediately. Setting agendas, had that made an impact, and even coordinating the fabric of research and innovation in the landscape. If those are the goals, then you really have to look at it long term. We were quite lucky, some of my colleagues, to be asked by the European Commission to look at what is the really long-term impact of all these framework programs. And this was a really challenging job because, there's all this data from all these projects, but, what is really, if you look back as far as FP1 and the data range, scientific papers is one, and I said patents and jobs, but you cannot get them out of these data on projects. You cannot get them out of all these huge number of projects and publications that get out of it. So we also try to really get the story from different domains of science, because the impact is not the same for each domain. So the thing that brought us the most insight were a number of very deep case studies in a number of scientific areas. And then you saw that the impact mechanisms go much beyond this sort of publication or 3 jobs created there. We looked at the first one is a very fundamental quantum information processing and computing. The second one was brain research. The third one was stratospheric research, solar technology, photovoltaics, research for the automotive industry and manufacture in general. And then you saw that the long-term impacts, and we're talking now 1-2 decades, is quite different for each domain. But some of them were really discovery, and then you can look at indeed publications and so forth. It goes out to more knowledge outputs, Discipline development, even this quantum information processing was a completely new area where the domain had to be formed, and the framework programs really helped forming a new domain and also getting industry involved. That was quite new. But for instance, in the automotive industry, the disciplines were were already there: engineering, IT, and so forth, and materials. The framework program didn't really do much for discipline development in that area. We looked at types of impacts that people told us about, that if they look back, it were focusing on devices, but all of them said agenda setting was really important. We jointly set the agenda for the research program, and that was for the very fundamental research, but also in the automotive industry, for instance, where they had common issues. These were big companies competing with each other, but one of the common issues were things like emission, fuel, efficiency, those sort of things that also have a public good, because safety is about societal issues. That is where they jointly created an agenda, how we could reduce emissions, how we could increase safety. So that was very important for them. Again, this networking, promoting self-organization of stakeholder communities, influencing regulations and standards, particularly also in the industry, that was important. Coordinating, influencing on policy, for instance, the Stratosphere research, they really helped changing the protocols for policy, strengthening networks. The list goes on, changing networks, levering funding for R&D, just making it more visible, and attracting more funding from the Commission, but also to the member states. Mobility, learning how to innovate in a different way, speeding up industry entry into new technologies, in manufacturing particularly. That was more in the quantum, but in manufacturing, tackling these common problems and addressing across the board, addressing areas of socio-economic importance. So, if you look at it in a very long term, impacts are so much more than just the publications that immediately come out of projects, or the innovations that companies might get out of European research policies. But that also makes it very difficult to really attribute, well, what did this 1, 2, 3 European projects, what did this contribute to these changes? That's very difficult to quantify, and particularly if you have policymakers, and also in this case, well, how much jobs did we create in Europe? Sorry, you cannot say that, and there's too many other factors involved that influence that. So, but it does show that there are a lot of input mechanisms to be taking account of. So, research and innovation policy evaluation is difficult as it is. These public-private partnerships add even more complexity. We say that we want to align policy agendas, that we want to coordinate, that we want to pool resources, but what does this mean in practice? How are we going to measure this? Do we have a clearly defined objective that we want to reach? That is quite difficult with all these P2Ps. What do you really want to achieve? What is the objective that you set out? So this whole set of impact mechanisms that I showed from these framework programs, that's also very much part of the public partnerships, and the societal challenge element of almost all the bonuses and so forth, make it even more difficult, because it has a long-term dimension. And how are you evaluating a bonus? How has that changed, say, the quality of the the environment in the Baltic area. That's going to be a long-term thing, and it's going to be in 10 years from now that you might be seeing some immediate effects. But also the efficiency question. Evaluation, you always ask, was all this programs and so forth, was it done efficiently? And one of the things that we hear a lot, if you go around the scene of the P2Ps, and I heard it yesterday as well, it takes quite a lot of effort. There's a lot of governance involved. There's a lot of sitting together in meetings involved. There's a lot of transaction cost. These partnerships cost a lot of transaction costs. A lot of people have to sit in a lot of meetings. Is it worth it? If you look at it from the perspective of the researchers, what was the added value for them to do this all together with all these stakeholders? Was it efficient enough? And that is a question that I hear from a lot of member states more and more. Isn't this all getting very complex, the governance of it and the amount of human resources we have to spend on public-to-public-private partnership? Now, on this question of what objectives did we really want to achieve, I have here just the sort of the change theory of P2Ps. Very simplistically, we say, we coordinate national research agendas, we get co-funding from the Commission, then we are going to align our strategies with the co-funding together. We get more efficient, effective funding for research that allows the best in Europe to collaborate with each other, and we will get improved quality and relevance of research. This alignment will lead to less duplications, larger R&D projects, better use of complementary knowledge in the countries, because we can pool together researchers from different complementary areas, more holistic policy approaches, maybe better use of joint infrastructures. And all this will have an impact on science, and this is usually where we look at science and innovation in a very short term, but it should have an impact on societal challenge and an impact on policy, and better policy then leads to more societal challenge areas. We tried, and this is again very complicated and I don't expect you to read it. One of the things is, the better you know what you want to achieve, the better you can evaluate it, because then where should we look at to see if we've achieved that. And this was what we call a logical framework analysis for the first GPI. This was on the Alzheimer GPI. I think the core messages here is that we spent months discussing with the stakeholders what is it actually that we want to achieve, and that was really difficult already. The discussion in the governance board, what is it that we want to achieve? We came up with, on the top end, policy indicators, and on the bottom end, science, more science-related indicators. So we looked at expected policy impacts, like better, more policies for, say, alleviating Alzheimer issues. We look at, the science outputs are only halfway, where you go from objectives to activities, outputs, outcomes, impacts, and it's the expected societal impacts that we in this case, better quality of life, less cases of Alzheimer's disease, and trying to develop indicators and see where the impact was for all these things, but particularly looking at, have we really improved policy making, research programming in this area? So there are some basic bottlenecks. As I said, if you define your objectives very well, you can then look for, if you evaluate, have we achieved it? But as you know, I guess from your own experience with bonus, research programming by collective, by a number of stakeholders, gets a very broad focus and very often fuzzy objectives. I understood from the discussions yesterday you have about 17 objectives, 17 thematic themes. That's quite broad. So evaluating whether you've reached all these 17 is quite difficult. What we see in a lot of countries is that the data, who actually takes part in all these partnerships, isn't really collected centrally. We have what I'll talk a bit more about, mutual learning exercises between countries on public-to-private partnerships. It was clear that one research agency doesn't know about ERA-NETs in another research agency or another ministry. No one has really started mapping the who actually take part, what projects are there in a really good way, and how that aligns with other programs. How it has changed national programming it's a bit of a black box. Has funding nationally changed because of these international collaboration projects? It's mostly anecdotal evidence. It needs big data collection with this neurodegenerative diseases, this Alzheimer project. We try to map all the research programming, all the research funding that is there in Europe on this topic. And that was a huge exercise. That was a sort of a baseline study. But the difficulty is that many countries, this research is also in institutions. It's not in programs. It's in institutions. How have you changed? Have we changed the agendas of these institutions? Is not easy to say. And I guess the key question is, could we have achieved this by a series of national programs or bilateral programs? The added value of doing in the partnership is still a bit, the key question for the future also. What is the benefit and what is the cost? Does the cost in all this extra governance outweigh the benefits? So the state of play in P2P evaluation, very short, individual initiatives such as bonus, but also other Article 185 like EDCTP have been evaluated. ERA-NETs have been evaluated, but the numbers are still small and mostly focused on the immediate outputs. At instrument level, yes, there has been evaluations of individual ERA-NETs and also the joint programming. The Article 185, as far as I know, are not sort of looked at as an instrument in general. And there's an ERA-Learn platform that is developing manual and concepts and so forth. So it is really now starting to get a dynamism. Yes, I'll be short about this also in terms of the time. We did a sort of a mutual learning exercise, as I said, with 11 countries that looked at the public-to-public activities, and governance is the key issue there. It's a lack of human resources, particularly for small countries, to be involved in everything. But evaluation was also a huge problem because the lack of data. How do you start by evaluating whether this particular cross-country collaboration has brought us more than say something that would be done only in our national countries. And as a result of this, countries are starting to map more clearly what they are doing. Now my last slide, as I said, we're getting more and more feedback in countries. Well, it is very complex and time-consuming, this governance. Not only that, there are so many public-to-public instruments that, how do I explain at home with the stakeholders what the difference is between an Article 185 and a GPI and an IRANET and a European Innovation Partnership and a PPP and a flagship FET? There's getting so many of them, and which one do we choose from? And member states are starting, and I think Finland was one of the first to really start saying, well, we need a selection process internally to decide which one are we going to join and which one are we not going to join, because it's getting just too complex. And that makes them think about what is really the added value of joining a P2P. And more countries are starting to think in that way. We can't be in everything. We need to really start focusing and see which of these instruments are useful for us. But we also need to think about the governance internally. It's not just changing the instruments. It's not just asking the Commission to be more, focused. It's also how do we deal with that internally in our own governance system, because I think particularly these societal challenges type initiatives have seen how difficult it is to join up, say, ministries of agriculture and science and energy and maritime thing, to really work together and define common agendas and define what is really a priority. So I think a very easy first step is starting to mapping and data collection of what you have achieved. I think from the presentations you've already really done a lot on that, and but I think one of the things for the future thinking about FP9 is really to make a better estimation of what are the transaction costs of all these P2Ps, the reporting, the complex governance boards, because a lot of particularly smaller countries and also bigger countries are suffering with this human resource bottleneck. How can we all be really involved in the strategic decision making if we have to join so many instruments? So I think it's really interesting to work from your bonus experience and to help thinking is how could we do this better in FP9. And yes, I thank you for the attention with this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I think it was very interesting. It is probably no secret that we are presently in a process where the Article 185s are actually evaluated, and I am pleased to recognize that your company is having actually a leading role in the evaluation of bonus, because it is nice to know that you recognize where the difficulties and the problems are. I mean, in the process, when we started to look at the performance of bonus, we of course recognized some of the things you are listing here. Of course, your experience is longer. And we tried to remedy let's say, first with internal activities and later on with external ones, which we see in the next presentation. So I think we have tried to address some of these issues, but not all, because the focus in the program is, of course, in the start, in the implementation, and then in the execution, and not in the evaluation. I think that is one thing I have learned, that evaluation, you have to sink it in relatively fast.
Yes, preferably you start thinking about evaluation when you start, but that's not what in practice, because you're still figuring out what you want to do, what you want to achieve, what your objectives are, that, thinking about evaluation, which comes 5 years, is usually, pushed backwards, and then suddenly you realize, oh, but where's our evidence? Where are our data? We don't know what we did 10 years back. So that is usually where you will have some challenges, as it were. Yes.
I think that's exactly the case we have as well. In this respect, it is perhaps an advantage that the evaluation of bonus is actually done while bonus is basically 2/3 through the program. So there's also possibility for adapting a little bit. Questions from the audience?
Thank you, Patrice, for a very interesting lecture, and most of all, thank you for now we know what to answer to those who ask us these questions, like how many workplaces your program facilitated to open, or did the Baltic Sea become cleaner after your program as a result of your implementation of your program. But I have more practical questions to you. And thank you for this nice P2P acronym. I always smile when I see it. But one of the P2Ps are also the joint programming initiatives, as you mentioned many times in your presentation. And of course, BONUS is 185 initiative. And we have been for number of years together with JPI Oceans, Joint Programming Initiative Oceans, together with them, looking for the optimal ways of collaborating and bringing synergies and avoiding overlapping. And what would be your suggestion of how to build these relationships between P2P like 185 initiative and P2P like joint programming initiatives, which is different animals, as we've been reminded so many times. Thanks.
Well, I think where to start is to look at your strategic research agendas and see where you have sort of common areas that you want to work with, and then you can decide, well, let's not have a call in BONUS and a call in JPI, but see if we can marry, say in a very particular thematic areas. I don't know exactly how the thematic areas of BONUS match or overlap there, but I guess that is an easy starting point. But knowing how difficult it is to program by committee already in even in the Baltic area, if you would really program with the whole JPI Oceans community, you would suddenly have even more research agenda. So that is the danger of getting even broader. And then you really have to think, are we really reducing fragmentation, or are we adding to it? So I would say collaboration is fine if it makes sense thematically, that you will reach the same stakeholders, policy users, researchers, and try to develop a strategy there. That would be my response there.
Yeah, we have exactly this thing. JPI is very overarching, but it is more decentralized and more variable. And BONUS is regional, but BONUS is very, very centralized. Sorry, this is it.
Okay. I think it is an interesting topic, and it is highly relevant for BONUS, not only for BONUS, but of course for all the other programs as well. More questions? I think if you have questions, which might very well appear in the next presentation or after the two next presentations, then we simply come back to this.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the next presenter is Professor Pauline Schnoes. I cannot you announce yourself. Your name, please, first.
My name is Pauline Snoeis Leon-Malm.
Thank you very much. That was more convincing. You are from the Department of Ecology and Environment and Plant Science, Stockholm University. You have conducted a very interesting and very fitting exercise. You have tried to figure out how is the scientific impact of BONUS. And I think it is a very interesting study you have done. Quite intensive also, a lot of work. You have presented a little bit yesterday. I think we are looking forward to hear more about that. Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
All set?
Is it on? No? Okay. Yes. Thank you. It is better than yesterday, this microphone. So, Yesterday I told you about the general evaluation of research science in the development of science in the Baltic Sea. Today I will present the impact of bonus, and the bibliometric data set here is the same, but now I will lift out bonus from this. And I was very happy that I was asked to do this task, because after having been 10 years in the advisory board, I left bonus 2013, and then I was asked to do this, and this is something I really wanted to do. I was so curious what bonus had achieved, and that's why I accepted to do this work. This presentation consists of 6 points. I will go through the publication volume, the publication patterns, how bonus influenced research topics, the scientific impact, cross-national cooperation, and I will end with some recommendations to bonus. It is slightly updated since I gave in the report, because I now also included most of the data from 2016, because they have a delay before these publications come into the Web of Science, so this is a little bit updated. As yesterday, I included in this study peer-reviewed scientific papers, because they are quality assured and widely disseminated. When scientific results are not disseminated in this way, they do not contribute to the progress of science to a large extent, simply because other scientists, for example in Australia, they cannot find your work. And also not to evidence-based decision-making, because this requires that the work you present, the conclusions you draw, are quality assured, peer-reviewed. And since bonus is policy-driven and solution-orientated, it is also so that adequate dissemination of the scientific results to society are an absolute necessity. And my presentation here is mainly about the scientific impact, but I also have some conclusions about the dissemination to stakeholders, the science users in society. So I have considered bonus papers that are papers funded or co-funded by bonus in the acknowledgements. I also encountered a lot of papers, especially in Bonus Plus, where bonus was not acknowledged, but others were acknowledged. And then I deleted these papers. I also found a lot of papers that were not reported by the bonus project, simply because they were published after the projects ended, and then the scientists are working on completely other projects or in a similar way, but not within bonus, and then they write bonus in the acknowledgements, but they are not reported to the Secretariat. The research should also be carried out in the Baltic Sea area, of course, or have relevance for the Baltic Sea area. And this excludes some papers that were presenting scientific results that were relevant for bonus, but they were not mentioning any part of the Baltic Sea area in the publication. And then it is very difficult to find this publication, also for other scientists, who, not only for me, but for scientists who want to know what's going on in the Baltic Sea, what is relevant for the Baltic Sea. If bonus is funding a project which doesn't even mention the Baltic Sea, it is a problem for finding this research. It also excludes papers in conference proceedings and books, etc., because they are generally much less accessible and much less or not peer-reviewed, and they are not ranked in this Web of Science, so most of them you do not find in Web of Science. Some are there, but you cannot take this as a criteria, because some of them are there and some of them are not there. So these were also excluded from this study. The publication volume. If we look at bonus, here you see to the left the structure of bonus from ERANET, ERANET Plus, and bonus 185. Then you see the timeline of bonus with the calls. The dots are the calls, and the bars are when the projects are running. And then you see the bibliometric data sets to the right, and I have 3 data sets, one called pre-bonus, one called non-bonus, and one called bonus. And non-bonus is running parallel to bonus, and the others are before. In this, I printed. So, in this first group, we found almost 3,000 papers, and in the second group, almost 5,000. And actually, I looked at 18,000 papers. I found 18,000 with the criterion Baltic or another part of the Baltic Sea, like Gulf of Finland or Kattegat. And there, it was often used in the references. So these had to be deleted. It could be about China and so on. But about 5% of these papers I really needed to download to see if it was Baltic Sea science or not. But we can say that in 15 years we published in the Baltic Sea almost 8,000 papers in almost 1,000 different journals. I calculated then what one paper would cost. And it seemed that in Bonus Plus, the price of one paper was 50,000 euros around. And that is rather cheap, because I know that the Swedish Research Council counts with double this price for a paper in natural sciences, which means that Bonus has been very productive. I could also use this very roughly to make a prognosis how many publications will Bonus produce, and then I came to the conclusion that this could be between 1,400 and 1,600 in the period 2017 to 2024. And this is about 10% of the total volume of Baltic Sea science that is published in this way, and it will increase to about 20%. And then you say perhaps, oh, this is not so much, but it is much if you consider that here I have included all Baltic Sea research and also a lot of basic research, because you cannot separate between environmental research and basic. So I have taken all Baltic Sea research, but not about insects in Baltic amber fossils, things like that, but research on the Baltic Sea ecosystem. And also in Bonus you have rather publications that are rather fundamental. For example, in the Balt Gene, in the Bambi project, in the Blueprint project, they are very much research papers that would not come if I would have tried to make environmental papers only. And these papers are tremendous important because they also have a larger goal for monitoring conservation of biological diversity and so on. So this is absolutely necessary knowledge for the future. I have to have a little warning here. This prognosis is that if today's projects are as effective, as productive as the Bonus Plus projects, and there are some projects that produce very little, and you see the variation in the viable ecosystem call. There is one project which is exceptional, BOC3, who already published 58 publications, and then there is another project with only one publication. So there is a tremendous difference here in the same call. Next thing is publication patterns. And here I have taken all 640 international publications. So it is also including the conference proceedings. And here you can see, I don't know if I dare to use this one. See. Yeah. Here you see the proportion of these papers that are not in the data set. So, and it is increasing, and that is something of a warning, because I think it's very important. There are 1,000 journals you can publish in, and so I would recommend to do that, so that people can find your scientific results. Another interesting thing here is that 70% of the 70% of the papers are published after the project end. It's the black area for Bonus Plus. Here you have Bonus Plus during project implementation. So science is a long process, and I do it myself after the project has been finished, the field work and the data processing and submitting the paper, etc. There it takes time. So 5 years of publication after a project is not unusual. Then here come the newer projects that started in 2014. So here is a little summary. 11% of the papers are still published in books and conference proceedings. And this is also a result of different traditions in different fields of research, but it is changing. And because nobody's going to buy a book that costs 2,000 euros printed in Switzerland or something. So you will bury your research if you publish in books. Then you have, which are not, I mean, open access books is of course an option, but it's better to publish in scientific papers. Then we have 62 papers that were not mentioning the Baltic Sea, and this is mainly the Bonus Plus papers, because that has been improved also within Bonus. Open access is very, very important, and unfortunately, this has been decreasing a little bit in Bonus. So I think this is something that should be turned back to more than 50%, if possible. Then how Bonus influence research topics. And this is really interesting because yesterday I showed the same for the whole Baltic Sea area. But now Bonus is lifted out, and you see that the specific areas where Bonus has been boosting science is social sciences, evolutionary biology, genetics, and environmental engineering. And then we have multidisciplinary sciences, technology, international relations, biodiversity conservation, multidisciplinary geosciences and toxicology, which also are increasing more in Bonus than in other research area, than in the other papers, the non-Bonus papers. There is a trend in time in multidisciplinary sciences, technology, international relations, but Bonus put a plus on that also. One area where Bonus had a negative effect was, for example, fisheries, and that is surprising, I think. But there are few projects in fisheries in Bonus. And then some more traditional fields of science that Bonus has not funded. The scientific impact now. There are two types of ways you can measure this, and citations is of course how a paper is used for the progress of science, but there is a delay in citations. After 3 years the level of citations stabilizes, so you can only use them after 3 years. But you can use also the impact factor if you of the journals, if you look at a huge number of papers, but not at individual papers. I showed you yesterday that the connection between this is extremely weak. And because the impact factor is not a measure of the quality of the paper, it is what a few people, the editors and the reviewers, thought about it. The scientific impact of bonus is significantly higher. This is over time, so we can mainly look at the 3rd year when everything has stabilized, and then you see that the non-bonus papers and the pre-bonus papers, they are cited about 3 times a year, and the bonus papers 4 times a year on average. And that means that bonus has a higher quality of the science it publishes. And the same was found for the journal impact factors, but because these are lower than these, you can say that the Baltic Sea papers, and especially bonus papers, have higher impacts than other papers published in the same journals, which means that Baltic Sea science on the whole, but especially bonus, has a larger influence on science, in marine science in general. Cross-nationality. Here is a very interesting figure where you see that pre-bonus and non-bonus, there is no difference in cross-nationality over these 15 years. So people are still doing the same thing. But within bonus, you had 52% of the papers that were a result of cross-national publication. And you see the black bars, they have decreased for all countries here. And that is a great advantage, of course. When I don't show it here, but you can see in a table in the report that the country that has produced most within bonus is Sweden. And the country that has produced less, relatively seen, is Poland. And this is something I think the Polish decrease. Poland has decreased the portion of its research funded by bonus. So this is something I think we have to look deeper into and identify the reasons for this. So cross-nationality and scientific impact are related. And this is the figure I already showed yesterday. You see that the bonus, the red bars, are higher everywhere, and that means that the impact factor was highest for the bonus papers. And then you can say, okay, cross-nationality increases scientific quality. And that is something we know actually, but it's there are not so many numbers on this. So this is a proof that this is true. And we also can explain this with different ways, and that is because well, this is just some of the explanations, that these studies are more multidisciplinary, they are more cited, they are more meta-analysis, they are about larger areas of the Baltic Sea, they are combining models, and they are often part of pan-European or circumpolar, even global studies where the Baltic Sea is one of the areas that was studied. Then I come finally to my recommendations to bonus, and in the first place, and also to the people working, in the scientists working in bonus, publish in papers ranked in the Web of Science. There are many such papers, and I suggest to write in the contract something like the scientific output from a bonus project should reach other scientists in the best possible way to maximize the likelihood that it will contribute to the progress of science in the Baltic Sea area and elsewhere. Because I find it such a pity if science is lost by people, that people cannot get it. I would also stimulate cross-national cooperation even more. Bonus has done a tremendous, fantastic job here, but it can never be enough of this. Also, I think that Bonus should show the publications on the Bonus portal. It was a tremendous job to really sort all these papers, but now we have a list. I think it should be updated at least once a year in a good way, so that people can see what Bonus has been producing. The Baltic Sea must be mentioned in the text, and of course these are papers from maybe carried out in the Skagerrak, which is North Sea, but still connected to the Baltic Sea somehow, somewhere, or in the drainage basin. Somewhere you can write in the introduction the relevance for the Baltic Sea. Just mention the Baltic Sea, then people will find your publication. And Bonus must, of course, be acknowledged if bonus funding was used. Finally, I want to say just a few words about what I also said yesterday about the societal use of science, and this is it counts for all the research produced in the Baltic Sea, because most of it is about the environmental problems or solving the environmental problems. And in Bonus, this is even more important because it is policy-driven and solution-orientated research, which is financed by Bonus. And here I suggest then that there will be special projects which will be critical review and synthesis of the knowledge that we have, incorporated, combined with looking at the practical use of the science. So you have your knowledge as a scientist and you go back and work together with the people who use the science and ask, are you using it? And actually, I saw yesterday that the project Bambi has done this, because it's a continuation of Balt Gene, and they found out, they had made so many good recommendations, but they found out that their science was used very little in society. And it is fantastic results, and it is fantastic important for the Baltic Sea environment, for conservation of biodiversity, but it is not used. So if scientists would get a project, a mission, okay, make a review and use it practically. I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit over time. So the problem is, what is happening in Bonus is that during project implementation, there is a lot of, and also in defining the projects, Bonus is very, very exceptional and very good in defining the projects together with the stakeholders who will use it in society. But then it is empty here. And here I would like to build this loop I talked about yesterday with special projects for evaluation, which also should be spread internationally. So it will give merits to the scientists also, because that's important to them. So I would like to end again with the seals. Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, thank you very much, Pauline. I think it was a really interesting exercise, and thank you also for the recommendations. We are a little bit behind, but yes, I think we should allow at least one question from the audience, if there is one.
Yeah, thank you very much for the interesting analysis. I think we should be a bit cautious when we use these numbers to calculate the cost of a bonus paper, for the reason that many of the publications where we are listing are co-funded by Bonus and co-funded by other projects, EU funding, national funding. So it's maybe not, it's not 100% bonus. It's for some of them it's maybe 10%, for others it's 50%. So that should be somehow acknowledged. Otherwise we are inflating our claims.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I was going to mention it, it was just, I forgot it. But, and that is one of my recommendations in the report to bonus also. I would like to suggest an investigation, because now we have all these papers downloaded, we have all the acknowledgements, we can make a survey of co-publishing. And one of my conclusions is also that the most successful bonus projects, they had much more funding than only bonus funding. They had European funding from other European projects, and they had also national funding. And often the most successful projects, they had money from all three. So, and that is a recommend, but it was not within my duty to do that here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I would like to introduce the next speaker. And now we are, Mike, come in here so that we can see you. We are going into the second pillar, which is now dealing with the impact of bonus on policy development and partly also societal challenges. And the presentation is given by Mike Elliott from the Institute of Estuarine and Coastal Studies at the University of Hull. And Mike knows bonus as well, and I think the analysis is a challenging one, because as we have heard before, it is not an easy job to evaluate that, and we will see what Mike is telling us about how the project has performed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for it, and good morning everybody. When I was putting this together, I was reflecting how long it had been that I've been involved in bonus, and indeed its forerunner, BIREMA. And I seem to spend a good part of the last 12 years or so looking at this. One thing I didn't put on that, and just to show my enthusiasm for bonus, is that I'm on 3 national marine committees in the UK advising ministers. And one of the things I've been doing is trying to promote the idea of a Baltic North Sea bonus. But I'm afraid, like some of my other ideas about UK-European cooperation, it's falling on deaf ears. But I'll keep trying. I'll keep trying. Okay, a lot of this work was done by my colleague, one of my staff, Steve Barnard, and I. But I don't want to go into a huge amount of the detail just because of the time. But what I want to do is get to some of the main messages on how a project like bonus has been used or can be used by society and is actually meeting the challenges. And I guess one of the things that we're all thinking about is how you get from this very precise science that's being done in order to a value for society. Sort of what does society make of things like this? So what we were asked to do, and what we agreed with bonus to do, was to try and do an overview, an impartial and objective, but I hope as scientists we're always impartial and objective, of the success of the programs, to provide insight into future developments. We weren't asked, although this would have been very nice activity, we weren't asked to examine, go through each program, and look at its development or management or delivery. But despite not being able to do that, I look back at some of the programs and I thought, well, what did we say, or what did the program proposers say when they started? And this is a program, I don't know if there's anyone from who was involved in Bonus Miracle here, but it's a program that is particularly close to my heart, and I like the program, so I thought I would use it. And this is what those red things, the things that it said it would do. Now, I'm not going to go back and tell you, did it reach those things, although it is actually embedded in the analysis, and so is the others. But you'll see the sort of things that researchers say they're going to do at the beginning, and then the challenge is to say they did it there. So what we wanted to do was look at how well did the bonus projects meet the challenges that bonus had set, the 11 bonus challenges, to look at the wider scope, how did the projects meet the wider scope of the program, and look at some selected metrics. I think they're called statistics normally, well, in bonus, but they're really metrics. Look at selected metrics of what the projects have provided to Bonus Secretariat, to look at those. And then finally, we wanted to look at how stakeholders see the impact of bonus. We had a set of evaluation questions, and I suspect there's quite a few people in this room that were sent those questions, and some of you answered them. We already know, as Pauline has shown, we know what the projects were. Hopefully that's big enough. So let's start the first bit, judging the projects against the challenges that bonus set itself. So we needed an output score for this, a scoring system, to try and make what in essence is qualitative information. We want to try and make it as quantitative as possible, and produce these things, and you'll see them, because you'll all see the reports, some of you had already. You produce them as heat maps, and I'm hoping that those challenges are firmly embedded on your brain, because if they're not, you shouldn't have been involved in bonus, but I'm hoping that they were embedded on your brain. But you can see there the different, down the, where are we going? Down this side are all the projects. These are all the challenges, and this is how well they were meeting those challenges. And so you can see these and that. So what I want to talk you through the things we did, and then I'm going to come to the conclusions for those. How good were they at addressing the research themes? And here I've just taken to start with the Bonus Plus projects, and as you see there in the side box, the set of themes. How well did the projects address those research themes? And as you see there, some of them had a key role in addressing those themes, and some had a subsidiary role. But it does show that some of the projects were really hitting the market across all of those, and others were just hitting one or two. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And then the final part, the bonus 185, for this, the last set of projects that are just being completed now, how they were addressing the research themes. And again, you see the themes there. Now, if you know those themes, you'll start seeing how they overlap with what member states would be doing on their own, and national programs would be doing. And again, I think this has just been mentioned, this overlap between those sorts of projects. But at least the main idea was, we have a set of themes. How well are those themes being met by different projects there? So there's a warning, no? If a project hits many of those themes, or many of those either key themes or subsidiary themes, we might think that's great, but that's not. Of course, that's not the case. Some projects that will be centered on one theme and do it incredibly well, only focus on that theme, are just as valuable, or even probably more valuable than those that focus on many themes. There and that. And then the other thing we wanted to look at was, what was the progression through the different calls? Is there a progression through them? Because if there isn't, it means we're not learning from one call to another. And that. Now, the analysis is a bit complicated, but can you just take my word for it? No, trust me, I'm a doctor. Just take my word for it that there is a progression through those calls. So this is good. We do learn from these. I mean, some sectors of society don't learn, but at least we are learning in this. So the analysis did show that the ability to cover the bonus challenges did increase with successive calls. That's great. That's hopefully one of the aims in that. The next thing we said was, well, we've got a set of performance metrics or statistics that you involved in the bonus projects were submitting to the bonus secretariat. So we looked at those, but we actually grouped them into stakeholder engagement, research integration, public dissemination, and then to some of the academic links there. So we were looking at those metrics on how well you did. And again, it's very complicated, but again, you just see the heat map of this, of the way that those were met, and what sort of metrics you fulfilled. I say I'll even stood here I can't read it, but you get the message, you know, the set of projects down the side, and then these metrics across the top and that. And then the final thing that we looked at was we wanted to get the information, as we say, from the horse's mouth, go to the stakeholders. So we had the three groups of stakeholders. We had the participants, the funders, and the users. And we tried to reach quite a few of these, and you'll see the number at the bottom there of how many were contacted, and the sort of response rate that we got. It wasn't as good as we hoped, but then again, you're all busy people. So we used this online questionnaire, but we did get usable information, and it was very important that the respondents were from all the countries. That was quite important. We did see differences. The participants were mainly academics, the funders were mainly government organisations, the user group were mainly policy-based workers, but at least that gave us a good indication. It would be nice to have had a much bigger sample, but you can't have everything you want in life. Coming from a Brexit country, that's certainly the case for me. So the groups, they were aware of the project, and some had very firm views about it, and others we couldn't get responses for them. Now, you can't read this, but if you picked up the policy briefing document last night, or the ones over there, you'll see this in there, and you can read them. But a lot of this was looking at the way the science had been taken up, the ease of getting the science to the users, and so on. And you see the smiley faces, mostly smiley faces. It's a small sample size in some cases, but better that than no sample size. And I say there's response to these statements. Has bonus contributed? Could you actually suggest that it was contributed? Now, unlike Paulina's project, this was not, she was buried in data, but we didn't have those data. We couldn't make it as quantitative as we wanted. So it's very much anecdotal, but still valuable data. That. Even as a quantitative ecologist, I still think this is valuable out there. So overall, there was satisfaction with that. So let's just talk about the conclusions, and then I want to leave with a few main messages that comes from bonus, but also from other similar projects, and actually echoes some of the things that Patrice was saying earlier in that. So there is variability, but in essence, the projects met the challenges, which and this was very high, and we think it was a robust defence of those challenges, which is great. In that. Addressing the wider scope, well, they all did this. Now, in the report, we've used the word redundancy, and I'm regretting using the word redundancy because that sounds a bit negative. What it means is that a particular aspect was being met several times. You could take the view that, well, if it's being met several times, does that mean you've wasted your money on some of those and you don't need all that? But we're using it in a positive terms. It's reinforcing a message there and that. But there is slight differences between Bonus Plus and Bonus 185, but that's what you would expect. And there are some themes, like one of them, the fisheries management one, that's really only met once, but it's still quite important there. And the performance metrics, we we came to the conclusion, we got a lot of information out of these, but there was still a lot more things that you could ask, and I'll come back to this and that. But, and there's always a but, there's always an elephant in the room, and it's always the bald-headed guy with glasses that's raising it. I don't know why, that there. Scientists get confused. I'm a scientist, or I think I am anyway. Is publication the same as dissemination? Some may think it is. It's not. Do scientists focus on the outputs rather than the outcomes? Perhaps I should go through these and ask for a show of hands, but I'm not going to. I'm not there. And I think they do. They get hung up on outputs and that. Differences between natural and social sciences. Paulina was talking about publications in papers, and I know social scientists who, for their life's work, if they produce 2 or 3 books, that's it, rather than the 10 papers per year. Scientists focusing on the single topic, not thinking out of the box, whereas policymakers have to take bits from everywhere. Not there. Are the projects superseded by what member states are doing? There are some projects on how do we bring about maritime spatial planning? How do we achieve good environmental status? How do we achieve good ecological status for the different directives? Well, does that mean if you're going to achieve those, are you duplicating what your member states are doing? Do scientists give policymakers the nice to know rather than the need to know? If I'm asked about something, there's lots of things that isn't a nice to know, but actually what do you need to know to answer a question? And I guess most of my life has been trying to do the need to know. And is there a risk of over-promising and over-delivering? No. We write things in grant proposals, we use all the right jargon, no, and are we going to deliver all that there? So I then started thinking about, Paulina and I have just been discussing this, I just started thinking about who uses what information. And I suddenly realized it's a diamond shape. It's a diamond shape in terms of how much information each group uses through this list. So you start off the general public that are getting, if they get one headline, Baltic Sea polluted, it doesn't matter about the science behind it, that's what they remember. So general public that are, I saw recently that the attention span of people has reduced to 8 minutes. It was 12 minutes a decade ago. It's now 8 minutes. We have 50-minute lectures in the university, so the students are not listening for most of that time. The students get some information, they can cope with a few pages. The PhDs and early career scientists, they can cope with the detailed syntheses. And then the experienced scientists that I think Paulina was focusing on, they can cope with, they've got the peer-reviewed articles. So it's increased now to this amount. Now it's going to decrease again. The consultants produce reports by the kilogram. We've all done it, haven't we? Look at environmental impact assessments. And who's going to read those? They get paid by the kilogram, I think. There. The policy implementers, they can cope with slightly detailed ones, 50 pages. But by the time it comes to policymakers, and I deal with government ministers, if I give them anything more than 2 pages, they're not going to read it. If I give them, sometimes they want 1 page or a paragraph. And so the policymakers 2 pages, and then POTUS, the president of the US, he deals in tweets. Is this the way we're all going to go? I'm an editor of a journal that Elsevier are starting to ask for tweets for papers. Okay, let's try and finish this. More elephants in the room. Does policy development work incrementally rather than being able to cope with one piece of research? Well, of course it works incrementally. If you talk to policymakers, I used to work for an EPA, when you're making that policy or implementing the policy, you've got information that's coming from all directions, you come up with a policy. If you then are asked, which piece of research informed your policy, you probably couldn't say. And that's the difficult, and I think this is Patrice's problem earlier, it's very difficult to say that, I think, there. Would an impact statement per project benefit? In the UK, we have a national research evaluation framework where we have to write an impact statement for some research. We have to write a narrative that says, we got the grant, we did this with it, we published it this way, and here's the written evidence of how society used it. And some of those may just be supporting letters. Some of them may be an economic gain, but we're asked to do that. Would that benefit? How do you separate project dissemination from informal dissemination by researchers? Now, all of us in this room have a hinterland. That is, you will pick up information working in bonus, and then you'll go to another meeting, I know ICs or HELCOM, and you'll pass on that information, and you'll pick up information from that, and you'll move over to other areas. And that's how it works. I was a couple of years ago addressing a House of Parliament committee, and they said, well, the marine system is so complicated, and there's so many organisations, it couldn't possibly work. And I said, well, it does work because of these informal links there. Are natural scientists willing to engage in societal aspects? I was at a meeting recently, and someone mentioned, they were trying to say how good it was that there was a good gender balance, but they also made the point that it was actually quite good that there wasn't many grey-haired old men in the room. I think I come in that. And then they went on to say, but what we need is people to look across the natural and social sciences and look wider than their field. And we were trying to make the point that perhaps it's only the grey-haired old whatever gender who have the luxury of looking across that. Someone working on their PhD cannot look widely. They have to focus there. So there's a problem there in that. And do scientists need more training and engagement? And I think Patrice touched on this, and of course they do. So, recommendations. It would be good to look at the stronger projects. Why did they do much better at certain things? There is a need, once the project's been completed, for a retrospective assessment. But again, as was mentioned earlier, when do you do that? Do you do it after 5 years, 10 years, or so on? And that. Asking for this narrative, I think, will be incredibly valuable, but you put the onus on the scientist to give you a very objective, evidence-based narrative for this and that. Performance measures, they're valuable, but one of the things that you have to start trying to do is weight those metrics of project performance according to the stage of the project, the size of it, the nature, the reporting period. The fact that a project has got a lot of papers may just mean that it's got a lot of people involved in it. Or those people have got very good societal links, and therefore it's being disseminated much better. And then pre-engagement is good in that. And then the final comments. We were faced with a bit of circularity in our argument, in that if we said the projects were fulfilling a set of challenges, what that means, they are vindicating the selection panel. I'm afraid I was on one of the selection panels, vindicating the selection of the projects. So projects selected according to, are they going to give good science? If you think about it, science has to do three things. One is it has to increase knowledge. One, it has to increase wealth. And the third one is it has to contribute to the quality of life. They're the only three things that it has to do. So did it do those? And of course, yes, they did. There's significant strength in depth, and you've seen that. But more analysis could be done. And then the stakeholder views support a strong positive impact in these areas. the application of science to policy development, the changes in funding patterns, and was especially for the innovative aspects and the involvement of different aspects. So bonus gets a huge tick because, based on the evidence we could see, it does that. There. So finally, a thanks to my friends in the bonus secretariat that I've known for quite a long time now. I think I remember Kaiser moving into bonus in the very early days there and that. And thanks to all the respondents. And if you didn't respond, don't complain that we didn't take your views into account. Perhaps next time. And that. Okay? Thank you. That's good.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. We will follow up on your last bullet point on the last slide in the next slide of the session to give possibilities for commenting on that. So that fits perfectly.
Okay, that's good.
Questions from the audience directly to Mike? Then I think we go into the next session part. And okay. I could guess that we will hear some comments directly related to your part, but also the first two presentations. And the idea is now that we are giving a 2 to 3 minute slot to various stakeholders. And I would like to suggest that you are introducing yourself very shortly. Okay. Introduce yourself very shortly and give us your impression on the overall impact of bonus. And you can basically choose freely which aspects you want to address. And I would like to start with Ulla Zweifel from HELCOM. Do we have her in the room?
Yes, thank you.
That's perfect.
So my name is Ulla Zweifel. I work as professional secretary at the HELCOM Secretariat. And if I should give you some, the most concrete examples of impact of science on HELCOM, that would be when new scientific findings are taken up in a regional approach or HELCOM agreement, and that also contributes to the well-founded decisions and measures to improve the state of the Baltic Sea. And examples of that could be input to joint management guidelines, development of new environmental targets, implementation of measures on new strategies. There are many examples of how contribution can be made to HELCOM work. But as you know, such impact takes time. It's quite rare that science is immediately taken up by practical management. And if I would give you examples of projects that have already had an impact, bonus projects, that will be only a subset of the projects. But there are also many ongoing projects that are anticipated to have an impact in the future. But I would also like to say that I think that if the aim is that bonus projects and their results should be immediately usable for practical management, I think this would require, first of all, that the calls are not only linked to policy needs, but they are also set up to resolve specific issues and questions, and that these questions are formulated together with marine managers and policy makers. I think it would require a closer cooperation with the projects, together with, for example, national environmental authorities. And it's not sufficient with publication of scientific results. Scientists must be prepared to give consolidated advice to managers and policymakers. I'm not saying that all projects should be done in this way. Science should not only support policy, but also scrutinize policy. But if the project calls give room for basic research that do not meet these sort of immediate needs of management and policy, then it just have to be accepted that it will take some time for science to have an impact. And I'm convinced that the majority of impact on HELCOM work and uptake in HELCOM will come in a couple of years' time, so that this type of assessment of impact on policy would be best suited a couple of years from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulla. We will get a possibility for discussion afterwards. So I would suggest that we are simply hearing statements. Keep in mind what you would like to say. Next speaker, Anne-Christine Busendorf from ISIS.
Anne-Christine Busendorf from the ISIS Secretariat. I will start by saying that how does ISIS look into the scientific impacts and define this? And for ISIS it's of course very important that the scientific work that we are carrying out, that responds to the needs of our member countries, and that it also responds to the needs of society. And of course also that we can show that what ISIS is doing jointly, that is more than what the countries might be able to achieve independently. And for us it's also very important that we are contributing to the emerging science agenda, both by identifying and catalyzing new developments. And we have a science committee that is consisting of our member countries, the 20 national representatives, and they have a very important work to carry out in that regard. We have also another more focused way how we are trying to look into these scientific needs, and this is through the arrangements of dialogue meetings where we are looking into a specific topic, and we are then asking member countries, other IGOs, clients, business, stakeholders about their scientific needs. And an example of this is a dialogue meeting that we arranged some time ago in Bergen, and where we were looking into the increased aquaculture production and the evidence base that is needed as a consequence of this. And then of course we are also meeting annually with our clients and our stakeholders to get some feedback on the scientific advisory work that we are doing, and to hear whether this is fulfilling the needs of our clients, but also to hear whether there are some new scientific priorities that are developing. We have agreed within ISIS on a strategic plan for 2014 to 2018, and in that plan we have outlined our topics of priorities, and we have outlined the tasks that due to these priorities needs to be carried out by data, by science and by advice. And in the follow-up and the preparation of the next iteration of this scientific plan, we're trying to strengthen the natural link between data and science, and also how this is then providing input to our scientific advisory process. And this is going to be one way how we are trying to measure the impact of the scientific work that we are carrying out. In addition to that, we are also in the process of identifying how we can better show the benefits of engaging in the ISIS science network. And despite our 100 years of existence, I mean, we are still working with some ideas around this, so it has been really valuable to get some input and information on the bonus processes on this. But some of the ideas that we are working with is that we are looking into how ISIS data and science actually is supporting the development of our advisory products, and also how we are responding to the needs that are identified in the advisory process for further research and science. Another way is that we're looking into how working with ISIS data, ISIS leadership and the facilitation of science that leads to peer-reviewed articles. And we are of course extremely envious when we are looking into Pauline's very comprehensive work, because one of the things that we see when we look into the Web of Science is that we don't actually get any acknowledgements of the participation in the ISIS expert working group. So we have some real issues to be able to backtrack from the participation in the ISIS work and to the peer-reviewed articles. And of course there are many things, but one of the last things that I would mention is also that we are looking into how ISIS participation in projects some specifically focused on the applicability of scientific results, how that leads to value added for the projects and for the member countries, including their advisory processes. Now, having listened now to the presentations today and yesterday, we can see that these are some of the same ways that BONUS are also operating to ensure that your strategic research agenda is reflecting the stakeholders and the end users' needs, and that your deliverables are also then being considered when looking into the scientific evidence base which is needed by decision makers. And also through cooperation between organizations working in the Baltic, showing how this is then ensuring the use of the science funding. And I think that it is some really impressive studies that you have commissioned, and which is really telling a success story. And during the next phase of the BONUS program, which hopefully is going to include both the Baltic and the North Sea, ICES as a marine research IGO covering both sea basins would of course be pleased to consider enhanced cooperation and how to ensure stakeholder and society in both regions would be able to leverage on the vast scope of results in a new and broader geographical context. And I think there is a good fortune in terms of timing, as our ICES science planning process post-2018 is underway. And we have shared philosophies as organizations, which could be stated to make us natural partners, as could our current common science priorities, which we could even think could be kind of even furthered in the next iteration. So I think there's an opportunity from ICES side to join forces and together exchange experiences and best practices and work on defining the important impact of science, and thus also highlight the value for society and member countries of what we deliver. So from ICES side, it's also a big congratulations on your 10th anniversary, and a big congratulations on the studies that you have commissioned that are showing the success and impact of the BONUS program.
Thank you, Anne-Christine. Next one in the row is Thalis Linkait for WhatsApp. And I would like to ask whether you can come in front so that you are visible for the camera and standing in the light.
Hello everyone, my name is Thalis Linkait. I'm representing Spatial Planning Cooperation WASAB, and also Horizontal Action Spatial Planning of the EU Baltic Sea Region Strategy. Within both of these networks, spatial planners during the last 5 years have been engaged in one specific topic, one specific task. Because in each country of the Baltic Sea region, we have to develop marine or maritime spatial plan by 2021. And this requires suddenly a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, a lot of assessment, a lot of methodologies, new approaches, something which in some countries have never applied, have never thought of, and also not only about methodologies and approaches, but we have to think about monitoring, evaluation of plans, and all these different subjects are the ones where we're looking at scientists. And we are very glad that from the very beginning we had a good cooperation with the BONUS program, and we were lucky to be on advisory board to suggest already themes before announcing competitions. And this is the way how we got very nice and very useful projects about space, about coast, and also in the new round I know that there is one project presented yesterday that will help us spatial planners to produce these maritime spatial plans. This is very direct way how to, from scientific research perspective, directly influence policy making in real life. And actually, we are sitting and waiting. I know the national administrations who are doing these maritime spatial plans, they are really waiting for knowledge, for scientific advice. There are many forums how we use this information, how we interact with the bonus projects. One I can only mention, we have maritime spatial planning forums every second year, which we organize, by the way, together with ISIS, where there is a nice mix of Interreg project representatives, bonus project representatives, different other policy makers, scientists, researchers, media representatives. So there is interaction and immediate transfer of information, of knowledge to those who are implementing and who are drawing these maritime spatial plans. And using this opportunity, I would just like to thank Bonus Secretariat for very good cooperation. And I have a gift, a small compass, which actually is like a symbol. So the bonus is showing or advising us the direction where the maritime spatial planner should go. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thalis. The next intervention comes from Elisabetta Balzi for DG Research and Innovation.
Good morning. I would like, first of all, to thank the speakers for the very, very informative presentations, the in-depth analysis that you did, and the recommendations that you gave, which are very, very interesting indeed. The impact is a major... The impact is certainly a major determinant for the framework program. It is a determining factor both in the design and in the monitoring and in the evaluation of a program itself. As you know, the impact, for example, in the evaluation of a project is one of the main criteria which is taken into account, but also throughout the evaluation cycle of our program is determinant. We use 5 types of impacts typically to monitor and evaluate our program: the science and technology impact, the socio-economic impact, environmental impact, impact on policies, and the impact on the ERA, so the EU added value and how the portfolio of projects influence a change in the establishment of the European research era. So along this line, what I wanted to add to what has been said by the speakers, for example, at the present moment, we are finalizing the interim evaluation of Horizon 2020, and this includes the evaluation of all the projects portfolio, including specifically also the ERA-NETs, including also of the Article 185. And there is also an evaluation of the JPIs. So it's the program as a whole, and all the instruments which have different identities and different scopes are evaluated, and this is very important also in the design. It's a cycle also in the design of a future potential programs. So what we can see that Bonus clearly has delivered with a strong impact on the quality and the quantity of science, so the scientific impact is clearly demonstrated. There is also a very important impact on environmental aspects, and as far as the policy impact is concerned, it's also very important, of course, for the EU policies, and as it has been noted in previous presentations, it is very important that the impact is not limited to to single projects. And what we are, for example, doing now specifically with our projects portfolio is what we call projects for policies. We analyze the impacts of all our projects portfolio relevant to the marine and assess how they are influencing the marine and maritime policies. And we can do similar exercises on environmental policies, on climate policies. We are going to publish this study, the results of this analysis, projects for policies for the marine and maritime. I think it will be very interesting to have this type of approach, so to analyze not by project, but by portfolio, and also to link to see how the bonus portfolio is influencing policies and how is this connected to the analysis that we are doing with portfolio from Horizon 2020. So taking the synergies among the different programs and how as a whole we are influencing policies. Another point that I wanted to mention is that indeed dissemination also is extremely important, and as it has been rightly noted, this goes far beyond the scientific publications, which are of course very important and needed, but we need also another level. We need a level of aggregation, a level which can reach in the end, as you were rightly saying, the policy implementers, the policy makers, and an all analysis at different levels. So I think here there is room for improvement, room for further actions. I think these were my main observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisabetta. Next one in the row is Donald Bosch.
Great. Well, I have three comments to make. First is by watching the evolution of the program is someone from a different country outside of Europe. It's been very impressive to see the development of a transnational scientific community. To be sure, the scientists knew each other, they read each other's papers before, they went to meetings, but they didn't work together the way that's happened now. And I think I've just seen the social dimension of that impact is rather special and hopefully will be sustained. The second, and I think there are lessons for the rest of the world about how that was done. The second is that I think we shouldn't forget how hard this is. Bridging this chasm between science and the use of science in society. The decision makers, managers who have to make these decisions want science, but they have a particular definition of the need, and it's here and now, it's rather focused. On the other hand, the scientists, of course, are interested in their own curiosity-driven questions. And we've all seen these proposals where a scientist, a proposer, makes a valiant effort to show how the problem is relevant to their research rather than their research relevant to the problem. And so what BONUS has tried to do in a way that I haven't seen done on the scale, at least elsewhere, is to try to provide opportunities for relevant, useful, actionable science, but also science that is open and flexible enough to allow creativity, innovation, and a much forward-looking aspect of it. And I think that's important. Has it found the sweet spot between the two? I don't know. There's probably more work to be done, but I think we all need to work in that arena. Again, I've just seen the evolution of scientists who are thinking of their science in different ways in terms of its utility. The third point I want to make is that we talked a lot about dissemination and impact and the use of information, and I am more and more struck by how scientific information gets into policy, and that it's not the traditional linear model that we think of, where a scientist prepares results, where there's someone in an agency, an organization who's technically trained who takes those and then provides them the choices available to the decision maker. In fact, this is a very democratic process, and it works through public information, increasingly so at rapid speeds. And I don't think I've heard much discussion today, yesterday or today, about the role of the media, not only the news media, but social media. And if we look at what's going on, for example, in climate change research, how papers, when they're published, get wide dissemination in the media, become part of the public discussion, influence how politicians get their information. They don't get their information from briefing papers. They get their information from things that appear in the media and people their constituents are talking about. So as we go forward, I hope that the effort, the movement, if you will, can continue how to become even more effective in these very nonlinear, complex ways that information is transferred and used. Thanks.
Thank you, Donald. Next speaker is Jaroslav Sorokotogiga. I hope I was not completely off in my pronunciation.
It's okay, yeah.
I think it would be an advantage to, if the speakers are coming in front, because then you are standing in the light and can be seen in the camera as well.
Well, I think the most important things have already been said, and first of all, as a representative of a foundation who is supporting basic research, of course, from our point of view, it's crucial to continue the support of such projects. I think yesterday by Pauline it was mentioned that the support of, I think it was used traditional science wording or something, is decreasing, and from our perspective, we're still focusing on it, and we're trying to stimulate the pure research in science. Regarding the policies, I think the first speaker today actually touched the critical issue that if you're addressing the policies, who will use the results and who's will read the papers. So either the end users, such as policymakers, should be involved in the projects, or they should formulate the tasks for the research community on which issues and questions should be addressed in the projects. Regarding the overall development of the program, for us, as I mentioned yesterday, the multilateral approach and that all the Baltic states are present in the program, it's a key, I think, factor of the success, because it gives researchers the possibility to have complex studies across all the region, not fragmental studies. And I know that bonus is, let's say, European program, so for us it's quite hard to give any suggestions or on how to, let's say, develop the program and which issues to address. But as I mentioned yesterday, we're still looking forward to cooperation, at least in the areas of the pure research. Maybe we're not so much interested in policy issues, because frankly speaking, I don't see how research performed by Russians in the project will anyhow be taken into consideration by our authorities, but it should be, I think, addressed through other initiatives, maybe HELCOM or some others. So that's maybe a summary. Thanks.
Thank you, Jaroslav. Next one is Anssi Melki from the Academy of Finland.
So, thank you. So my name is Anssi Melki and I come from the Academy of Finland. Why I'm standing here is last year we made a state of the scientific research in Finland review, which comes out every 2 years. And as a special theme, we had the broader impact of research. And I very much, I was coordinating that part of the review. And I very much enjoyed the brilliant herd of elephants we heard today and some comments on the dissemination, because they very well reflected the findings we had in the review. Our assessment goal was to make the different impacts of scientific research visible and understand how they come about. And we all know there are zillions of different ways we can see impacts in the long term from research. In the end, we found it useful to try to put some structure on that, and we approached it from the science view, not from the goals view, because the goals are usually determining of what is understood by impact and how it's assessed and measured. And we the outcome for us was to identify 4 different roles of the science in society. Not exactly the same as Professor Elliott was given the 3 goals of what the society expects from science. But our roles, whereas it was firstly the science provides basis for decision making, that's very obvious, we've heard about it today. It also supports practice development, wealth and prosperity, and human understanding and worldview. Now, I just give a little bit of how I see these connect to what we heard about the bonus outcomes and results. Basis of decision making that's a strategic goal for bonus. There's it's obviously there. Practice development is basically what we understand. It's building the research-based knowledge, competencies, and skills to the people that actually they are working on the basic decision making, but also in all of those activities that contribute to the wealth and prosperity. Wealth and prosperity is not only material, technological, but it's also the sustainability, the different ways that we take care of our society in order to have it wealth and prosperous for our children and grandchildren as well. And last but not least, the human understanding and worldview. It's maybe a little bit complicated title, but it brings to us something that is often discussed as a culture, civilization kind of things. And it may not be so obvious in bonus, but it's very important also in the media and dissemination to understand the role, importance, and well-being of the Baltic Sea, its fragility, and how important it is that this research is also all the time developing ways of keeping it good for the future as well. In addition, we concluded in our review that scientific top-level research and broader impact are not conflicting goals. They are mutually supporting each other if done wisely, and understanding how especially understanding how the dissemination can be arranged in such a way that it supports these two. And certainly, as we've seen, there is no conflict between those in bonus. So on behalf of the Academy of Finland, we congratulate bonus for the first 10 years of research, and which is really showing impact both within and beyond academia.
Thank you, Ansi. The next one is Eva Rantamer, Interreg Baltic Sea region.
So I'm coming from the Interreg Baltic Sea region program, which is an ERDF, so European Regional Development Fund funded cooperation program around the Baltic Sea. And we are funding transnational cooperation in order to increase the capacities of different actors around the Baltic Sea, the authorities in different levels, SMEs, NGOs, to work together and solve common problems in the Baltic Sea. So they may be in transport issues, they may be in innovations, and a lot of our topics also relate to the Baltic Sea and the quality of the Baltic Sea and the sustainable use of Baltic Sea resources. And a lot of things what has been discussed today and kind of recommendations for the policy impact is actually something what is quite a lot built in our projects, because we our projects are always, the partnerships are a combination of research organizations, authorities, NGOs, or SMEs. So the end users are in those projects, they are included there. And the research done in our projects will need to produce outcomes, recommendations already during the project lifetime. The different actors will need to be integrated in the projects. Also the outcomes of the projects will need to be produced in a way that the end users can use it in a format or language that can be then help the end users to take over the outcomes of the projects. Nevertheless, I can still say the impact of our program is still not much easier to evaluate than the bonus. So this is a common problem for different kind of programs. Then I would like to come back to the impact of bonus. So there is a lot of cross-fertilization, I would say, in the area between our programs and the actors in our programs. There are many of you have taken part in our projects as well, and I think this is a very important basis, because there are, in maritime spatial planning, there are projects which have fertilized each other. There are in sustainable shipping, safe navigation, then there are agri-environmental measures, those projects which, you've been taking part in an Interreg project or in a bonus project. And we see that this kind of cooperation should continue in the future. What I see that the Interreg can gain from bonus is this evidence-based decision-making, this level of science. I'm always so impressed of the presentation of the projects here, because you are scientists who are so enthusiastic about your topics. We are quite often facing the problem that we have consultants with the kilograms of papers in our projects, and I find this was quite good, and I see sometimes that there is a difference. So you are enthusiastic in your topic, and you are you really present the high level of science, and this is something that we pay attention in our projects. Andres does a huge work going through our project proposals and naming also those who are in connection with bonus projects, and we do try to follow up that our projects will contact you, will discuss with you, and take over also the research that you've done in the bonus projects. And this is something I definitely want to continue, we will continue, and then I hope also that many of the bonus projects can take part in our tools that we try to offer, project platforms, workshops, in order to get to know the partners, who the partners in the Baltic Sea region area, and to work for common goals for the better Baltic Sea.
Thank you, Eva. The next one is Markus Reckermann from Baltic Earth Program.
Okay, thank you. My name is Markus Reckermann from the International Baltic Earth Secretariat. So, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to say something. And I will read a little bit more than speak freely, sorry, but I think I'm better written than oral. So, let me start by congratulating the Secretariat, especially Kajsa and Andres, for this extraordinary success of boosting applied ecosystem research in the Baltic Sea region. I think we cannot praise you enough for this tremendous work and service to science in the Baltic Sea region. So, but let me share my personal view. I think the main achievement, next to the sheer project results, is the establishment of an international and interdisciplinary network of scientists and institutions. To a large extent, these networks will stay after bonus funding has gone. Bonus projects and their participants form a large family with strong interrelations and cross-relations, also with the help of the clustering efforts of the Secretariat. And this is, in my view, the added value and the true achievement of bonus and of the Secretariat in particular. So I'm speaking on behalf of Baltic Earth, which is an open Earth System research network of scientists and institutions in the Baltic Sea region. Just like BONUS, Baltic Earth is about international and interdisciplinary collaboration. Baltic Earth research topics are organized in so-called grand challenges encompassing regional Earth system research. There is no central funding involved, so we are rather a club of scientists and institutions which contribute to common projects, usually by own funding. But still, research needs money. So projects from the Baltic Earth scientific community have been quite successful in the BONUS Plus phase, as many research objectives of Baltic Earth were addressed then. The aim of some of these projects was to understand the impact of eutrophication and a changing climate, and also the carbon cycle better. And specifically, these were Amber, Baltic Sea, with a big C, eco-support, and these have been quite successful. Also in the recent phases, Baltic Earth scientists were quite successful, and I'm referring to Gregor, especially with Pinball and Integral, which is coming up now. But that is solely from the Biogeochemical Grand Challenge. So BONUS has been quite beneficial to parts of Baltic Earth research, but Baltic Earth interprets the Earth system to be more than ecosystem and biogeochemical applied research. So let me also share some critical remarks from the Baltic Earth researcher community. And that refers a little bit to what Don just said about the sweet spot, finding the right balance between the applied and the basic research a little bit. In the recent BONUS calls, more application-oriented and less basic research projects were funded. In addition, physical and chemical disciplines were clearly underrepresented, which form an integral part of the Earth system concept of Baltic Earth. Research on the impact of changing climate on the marine ecosystem requires improved models. For instance, the water cycle in the Baltic Sea region was not addressed. The water cycle controls salinity controls food web functions and biodiversity, but also stratification, which in turn controls fluxes of oxygen. We still do not know the role of the various drivers of hypoxia, physical and biogeochemical, one of the major environmental issues of the Baltic Sea, but also of many other coastal seas worldwide. Research outside the BONUS themes of ecosystem and benefits for humans has had no chance because there is no access to more basic and non-applied research funding in the Baltic Sea context. So currently there's really no room for the improvement of basic knowledge and process understanding in ocean and atmospheric physics in the Baltic Sea region. And this is a major drawback, because more and more sophisticated observational systems, for instance satellite data and computing capacities, are available, allowing for a better process understanding of the Earth system, which is urgently needed. Furthermore, the reduction of uncertainties and increased understanding, predictability, and last but not least, detection and attribution of climate change signals need to be investigated. Therefore, we would advocate the extension of next BONUS phase or BONUS follow-up program to include these more basic physical research topics in addition to the current applied ecosystem service-oriented topics. Also, they should be included in the same family of funding projects and not directed outside to other funding programs with no direct regional relevance or connection to other Baltic Sea projects, because we think a separation of the applied and basic research topics would be counterproductive. And the big asset of BONUS, we think, or a similar follow-up program, is the family character of programs with easy cross-connections and collaboration. So, having said that, we wish the BONUS Secretariat all the best in the upcoming negotiations for setting up the next phase. successfully supporting international and interdisciplinary science in the Baltic Sea region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Markus. I check that we get that piece of paper. Yes. Thanks. Next is Gilles Liricola from IFMR.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been asked to give a 3 minutes comment on bonus. I'm very recent in business, as you know, as already said. France, unfortunately or fortunately for you, has no access to the Baltic Sea. But seriously, I was very impressed by all the projects you have been carrying out in this time during these 10 years of research project and study of the Baltic Sea. We are thinking of enlarging the bonus to a bonus 2, has been talked about, and trying to have a comparison between what has been done in the Baltic Sea with the North Sea. And the North Sea in sensus lato, as we say in Latin, in large sense. And France will be very happy, and my institute, IFMR, which is dealing with research, will be very happy to contribute, especially and do a comparison with the Baltic Sea. And I see that there is a lot to do. One main important topic I believe that could be addressed is the climate and how to understand the climate change. We had somebody from DG Climate who have addressed a message yesterday, and I think the Baltic Sea is probably one of the best, I think, in the world area to understand how the climate has been recorded in the past, especially after the melting of the ice, and how it's been functioning. You have encountered a lot of problem with the freshwater, with the anoxia, and this is really a very nice area. You have this Ancillus Lake, the Litorina Seas, and I think we can enlarge this idea to understand how the climate has changed and give further comments to what will be the climate in the future. Because if we want to understand the climate change, how the climate has changed in the future, if we want to do very good models, we need to understand the past, and we need to understand the paleoclimate. And I believe that there's not enough project to understand the paleoclimate, and I'm really sure that the Baltic Sea, from some of different works was been carried out previously, is a real analog laboratory where you can do that. In any case, I've been asked also what will be the difference between the Baltic Sea and the North Sea. You cannot compare a semi-enclosed basin, which have only an inlet to the main oceans, to the North Sea. And I say this is a very bad way of saying that, because you're facing some of the problems who might be different due to the basin, but are the same problems. So we are really to do and take into account which has been done in the Baltic Sea, and to see how we can apply what's your recommendations to the North Sea. And I think this is also very important. And I really hope we will be able to contribute to the next CSA to try to see how we can propose some action for the future. And I really hope that for the next framework program, we will have a bonus too, and I don't know how it will be, if it will be an article 185 or something else, but I think it's very important to try to enlarge the collaboration, and we will be there, and whatever the election will be, even if France is out of Europe, I hope not. I'm joking, but I'm a little bit scared. We will be there to collaborate and take into account what of all the job you have done already in the bonus 2, in the bonus 1, and to do that in the bonus 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gilles. Next in the row is Elja Tika from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland.
Dear friends, I'm ambassador for Baltic Sea Affairs in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs here, and at the same time I'm national coordinator for the Baltic Sea strategy of the EU. And as you know, the purpose of the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region is to jointly find solutions to the special challenges faced by the region. According to the main goals of the strategy, save the sea, connect the region, and increase prosperity. And we all know that the most well-known of these challenges, special challenges of the Baltic Sea, is the pollution, the eutrophication, the increasing marine littering, and the threats to the ecosystem, which can or possibly will be even worse with the climate change. Then on the other hand, this pollution of the Baltic Sea was actually the main reason why the strategy was initiated in the European Parliament in the end of last decade. But the strategy at the same time will also promote prosperity of the region. The countries of the Baltic Sea region want to develop their region and their societies, create jobs, and at the same time use the existing resources in a sustainable manner. And to make this combination possible, we need evidence-based knowledge and innovative solutions, new ways of thinking like the circular economy. And that is where the science and multidisciplinary research are needed. And we think that the results of these projects must be brought as close as possible to decision makers and also businesses. The bonus program has in many ways been involved from the beginning with the EU strategy. And many of bonus projects bring new knowledge and have an impact, for example, on measures for saving the ecosystem, for maritime spatial planning, as Talis mentioned here, and safer and cleaner shipping in the Baltic Sea. 4 bonus projects are also flagships of the EU SPSR. And I think that even more projects could be awarded the flagship status of the strategy. The flagships in the action plan of the strategy are defined as projects that have an impact on the whole of the Baltic Sea region and that show direction towards future, towards solutions. I would in fact like to encourage the project coordinators, at least in the new projects, to make acquaintance with the action plan of the EU strategy and to contact the policy area coordinators if you think that your project would be suitable and can benefit from this flagship status. I think it could be useful, for example, in dissemination of the activities of the projects and then of course the results, and especially in bringing the results to the policy level. And in this respect, I'm very much looking forward to the new Blue Baltic projects that have been launched because the blue growth is seen as a great opportunity for the Baltic Sea region. Finally, I just wanted to tell you that we are currently updating the Baltic Sea strategy of the Finnish government. And in the draft, there is a chapter on promoting knowledge and innovations, cooperation in this field, and there the importance of bonus program and the support for its continuation and widening to include even the North Sea are mentioned. And with this, I congratulate you.
Thank you, Arya. Next speaker is Irina Makarenko from the Black Sea Commission.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a great pleasure to join the bonus celebrations, and many thanks for the invitation. And also I would like to extend our congratulations on your progress and also this impressive 40 projects that I heard yesterday, especially if in the Black Sea region we have like 10 times less projects, I would say. As you may know, I represent the Black Sea Commission's Permanent Secretariat, and we are one of the 4 European Regional Sea Conventions, same as the Helsinki Commission. And speaking about figures again, we are like 4 times younger than ICES and 2 times, I think, younger than Helsinki Commission, but still we already have a long history of our fruitful cooperation, and I think that bonus is really benefiting to this fruitful cooperation. Indirectly, we're also linked to Baltic Sea through one of our contracting parties. So Russian Federation is also having an access and benefiting and contributing to the bonus work. So we are happy also to observe this work from on behalf of the Russian Federation. So as it was mentioned already, we have very similar troubles, similar challenges in our seas, and quite similar issues on our agenda and gaps in the research as well as the gaps in the decision making, I would say. And we are still working hard on incorporation of some new challenges like climate change, like marine litter, like marine noise, and we also work on all these colorful abbreviations like SDGs and, you know, green economy, blue growth. And in fact, every time I hear one of the mottos of one of our NGOs, which sounds like greening the Black Sea, I'm always crying, because this is, you know, knowing that nutrients is the biggest problem for the Black Sea. It's really, really, you know, sounds very weird. And speaking about nutrients, let me just mention that we had a very nice experience of working with HELCOM. A couple of years ago, we finalized an important project called Baltic 2 Black, dealing with reduction of nutrients pollution. And because we really need to sustain the deliverables of this project, I think that bonus experience is also very important for us, and we would like to follow each and every deliverable of the dedicated projects. We also, of course, benefiting from dissemination campaign and also by the tools which were developed by different bonus projects. Just to mention that since we last met at the advisory board meeting, we have some important success from our side in the Black Sea. We finally have one important document, which is less than 1 kilogram, but still, and this is the Black Sea Integrated Monitoring and Assessment Program. Why I'm mentioning it here, as you may know, we only have Romania and Bulgaria, which are members to the European Union, and the MSFD and other directives are not legally binding. So in this document that I mentioned, for the first time we have some legal linkages to the environmental legislation of the European Commission, and we have finally a definition of the good environmental status in the Black Sea, and also a list of some important databases and some activities for data sharing with the other regional sea conventions. And we also have a list of priority studies, which I can now easily share with our colleagues from DG Research, especially taking into account that the Black Sea Commission is not, unfortunately, eligible for the Horizon 2020 projects, and you know, this is now something to deepen our cooperation on. Let me also mention that we are finalizing our so-called State of Environment report, and we will have a dedicated chapter on socio-economics, and I'm sure that our scientists will be using some of the tools and some of the deliverables produced under the bonus projects. Another, the last significant achievements we had, we now have a list of indicators which will be annually reported by the Black Sea riparian countries to the Black Sea Commission, and I'm very happy that one of the reporting parameters on nutrients was in fact taken from HELCOM. So the HELCOM heat assessment tool will be one of the parameters of reporting in the Black Sea now, so which is also a nice news and will give us a chance to harmonize somehow our assessment and also, assessment between the Black Sea countries and also to somehow make it compatible and comparable to the one of the Baltic Sea. So I will finish here, and I would just like to mention the congratulations once again with your 10 years anniversary, and I wish you success with all your projects and especially the new ones, and we will be delighted to follow your progress and learn from your experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Irina. Next speaker is Pauli Merimam from WWF.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and I would like to thank Bonus and all of the staff and team for a fantastic event, and as well all the speakers and presenters for some very interesting discussions and dialogue. As you said, I represent the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF, which is a global conservation organization operating in 100 countries around the globe. But even with this global reach, the Baltic remains for us a high priority, which is why we have a Baltic ecoregion program comprised of WWF and NGO partners that work together to secure a healthy, diverse, and resilient Baltic Sea across the entire region. And to that end, we are delighted to have the opportunity to serve as a key stakeholder and partner to Bonus and the other regional organizations, HELCOM, et cetera, in the region. And as a science-based organization, WWF is of course dependent upon strong scientific evidence to inform and guide our outreach and advocacy efforts, which include direct engagement of the public and private sectors to support science-based solutions to some of the many challenges we face here in the region, of course, around the globe. And WWF has an increasing focus on our oceans globally, as well as here in the Baltic. And our intention is, of course, to generate a new wave of support from the general public to understand how a healthy ocean fosters economic and environmental development benefits, of course, which we are all dependent upon. And we're very happy that fortunately, many governments, communities, and organizations are recognizing and becoming more aware of the need for a more coherent, integrated, fair, and science-based approach to this management, and that we must plan and implement our economic activities in such a way to balance our desire to improve economic health with the imperative to sustain the economic and environmental base which this economic dependency is based upon. And this is why we've also been a strong advocate for a truly sustainable approach to the blue economy and the importance of establishing a scientific base to understand exactly what this is, so that we can determine if the policies and practices driving this blue growth agenda will actually result in the economic, environmental, and social results that we want. And in this respect, we are delighted that Bonus is leading the way. The work of the Bonus Research and Innovation agenda to boost sustainable development based on sound scientific knowledge through cross-disciplinary, multi-partner, and transnational projects has been enormously valuable. And the results of the many projects undertaken, as we heard this morning, and of course the many projects still to come, are providing the critical input needed to help steer the blue economy in a sustainable direction. For this work and for the valuable collaboration, we thank Bonus for their efforts. We very much appreciate the commitment to engaging partners like WWF and other NGOs in the communities around the region that have a stake and a very important contribution to make in this work. And we offer again our warm congratulations for a fantastic 10 years and look forward to a close collaboration going forward with you and of course with the other stakeholders and partners. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pauli. Next speaker is Yves Kühlmalik, Estonian Ministry of Rural Affairs.
Okay, hello. Yes, I'm Eva Kulmalik. I'm Eva Kulmalik, coming from Estonia, Ministry of Rural Affairs, Fisheries Economics Department. And the ministry is a quite recent steering board observer member, only a few years, but we can say that why we joined with this bonus. And Ministry of Rural Affairs is an active funder in different research initiatives like GPA Ocean, GPA FATSA, different ERANETs, and as well as now the bonus program. And international research cooperation is part of our national research program for agriculture and fishery, and bonus program has proven in many ways why such kind of cooperation in science is necessary and important. And I make it brief. I'd like to bring out 6 aspects of that. And first off, why we are like a funders joined this bonus program is a regionalization aspect. And that was told about Baltic Sea strategy, this blue growth agenda for Baltic Sea region. If we are talking about common fishery policy, we understand that it is important to address common challenges by sea basins. And sea basin strategies and different developments needs a sea basin science, we think so, and sea basin science input to have knowledge-based, long-term management of the region. Secondly, the quality of the Baltic Sea science. As a study already proved that this analyzes that the science quality, thanks to bonus program, is increased. And also I like to mention that engagement of PhD students and young scientists is work what I really like in the bonus. Third one is cross-national research cooperation, and we saw from results that the Estonian case, this core papers number in cooperation with more than 2 other countries increased significantly, and it is only also benefit for funders to have such results. As a ministry, we of course appreciate these research results, and the fourth is application of science to policy development. Although we have seen that sometimes it is quite a slow process, but it is very important and necessary to continue. And what wasn't mentioned in this studies, because probably it is more recent developments, but I appreciate initiative in bonus, like a bonus project clustering. It's making linkages between projects, sharing data and cooperation between project teams, making together seminars. It's just a very good initiatives. And the last and not least, we can talk about today the impact of bonus, and we can't forget, we shouldn't forget the backstage. I mean, Kaisa and your team, because you have done excellent job, and working in administration, I really appreciate you have done very excellent job, so congratulations.
Thank you. Yves. Then we continue with Jacqueline Woods from JPI Oceans.
Good afternoon and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words today on behalf particularly of Catherine Angle-Hansen, the Director of the JP Oceans Secretariat, but also on behalf of the Management Board for JP Oceans. We've heard an awful lot of things already. I just wanted to perhaps go a little bit off my script, but pick out a few key things that haven't been said or that could be emphasised in from the last couple of days' discussions. One of the things I should start by doing is just saying a little bit more about what JP Oceans actually is. It's been mentioned a number of times, but not everybody in the room will be quite so familiar with it. It's one of the 10 joint programming initiatives. Joint programming initiatives are really a process. They're not a programme or a project in their own right. They're a process, a way of working, a way of bringing national governments, national investments together in marine and maritime science to try and align research agendas to get the best of the limited amount of public money available for marine and maritime science. We have 22 countries now involved in JPI Oceans, along with the Commission as an observer and non-voting member. And we're also reaching out to the wider international community, particularly the US, Canada and New Zealand, but others on a case-by-case basis. JPI Oceans developed in 2015 its broad strategic research and innovation agenda, and within that the community is now taking forward a number of actions. This is not just joint calls for proposals, though those are important too, but also looking at ways that we can work together better through the sharing of infrastructure, through data harmonisation, through the creation of knowledge hubs, networks, whatever is actually needed to address some of the bottlenecks that we face in the marine science community. We don't have a specific definition of impact for JPI Oceans. We work with the other JPIs. We heard some of the P2P initiatives discussed this morning, but what we do is recognise that impact is essentially important, and we build that into the actions from the very outset, along with evaluation metrics and criteria, so we're capturing the information as we go along. What we haven't heard today, really, or in fact in the last 2 days, we've been talking about impact, but why actually is impact so important? And fundamentally, we're talking about public money, we're talking about your money as taxpayers, either channeled through the European Commission's framework programmes or through national investments. So we're all, to a large extent, self-employed. And we have to be able to justify what we're doing to ourselves, to the wider community, and to fight for the budgets that we're interested in for marine and maritime science against all the other competing demands that are made by the taxpayers. Do we want to be funding marine science? Do we want a new hospital? Etc., etc. Those are the sorts of issues that we're addressing in society. We have to be absolutely clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it and why it's going to make a difference. So I think that wasn't really brought out in the last day or so. So JPI Oceans is taking forward a number of actions with impacts built in, impact opportunities built in. For example, in deep sea mining, we have a research project sharing infrastructure, but looking directly at influencing the International Seabed Authority's mining codes. So something where it's very obviously targeted from the outset what we're trying to do. You also heard that we've got a number of projects now on microplastics, an emerging research topic, where the countries in JPI Oceans, 10 countries, came together a couple of years ago and said, this is clearly an emerging issue, we'd like to do something, let's not necessarily go through the sort of long-winded process of influencing the framework programme and then getting a call out and then responding to it, but let's actually put some money straight on the table, have a call for proposals, fund some projects, get on and do it. And that's a sort of example of the flexibility that the JP Oceans community has to take things forward when they see an urgency. But we're also, as I say, building an evaluation from the outset and looking at a range of measures. One thing which has come up in the discussions has been what's the difference between JP Oceans and the interaction with bonus. And clearly for us, JP Oceans is a pan-European initiative with its 22 member countries. It's looking at a whole range of marine and maritime issues, not just on a regional seabed basis. So that, of course, is absolutely important too. Bonus, as it currently stands as a 185, is predominantly a funding mechanism to generate and take forward projects. And so both of those can exist very well in complementarity. However, it is recognised that there are synergies, there's scope for greater interaction. So one thing I wanted to put on record is that the JPI Oceans Management Board and the Bonus Steering Committee have established a subgroup, working group, looking at the scope for synergies, the areas where we can exchange information, share best practices between the secretariats, between the ways that the programmes are developed and run. And that, I think, is a really important aspect, and we see that continuing, I hope, and as we go forward. Looking specifically at bonus and where we can be successful together, one of the other things we haven't heard about is we've heard the vast number of publications, for example, that have been made through the bonus project. One of the things that JP Oceans also thinks is important in terms of impact is looking not just at the research that's newly being done now, but looking at some of the research that's been commissioned in the past. Are we getting the optimum impact from that pre-commissioned research, the money that's already been spent? And I think that's something that we can also perhaps look with bonus at the existing projects. Are we getting the best out of those? We've been celebrating and heard about the impacts of bonus in the last couple of days. We've heard a lot already, and clearly bonus is making a real impact in the policy dimension, particularly around the MSFD, but in other areas also. And it's provided a harmonised way to look at the issues surrounding the management of a regional sea basin, harmonisation of data, clustering of projects, I think is a particularly important aspect. And it would be good if we can develop some ways of clustering the bonus projects with the relevant JP Oceans projects in due course. And there's a real opportunity now, I think, for the bonus community, as the projects continue to develop, to also bring the bonus 185 experience to the wider European and international communities. Bonus has developed some very good tools and ways of working, and there's, as we've heard, the regional Black Sea already as willing to learn and interested in learning from this, but there are other areas too where bonus could share its expertise and examples. And that's really, I think, the key thing is you've learnt a lot, done a lot, and let's share it for the benefit of the wider community. So as this is a celebration of 10 years, bonus, many congratulations, and we look forward to continue to work with you, drawing on your many achievements and highlighting those perhaps through JP Oceans as well, maybe being a platform for bonus and its successor to collaborate with the wider European and international community going forward. So thank you for that, and let's continue to work for the benefit of all who have an interest in the state of our oceans and seas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. It was an interesting overview, and I'm afraid to say that we have not the time which would actually be needed to discuss what we have heard. We'd like really to thank all contributors, and I think there was a lot in those statements which we will look at and follow up. But before closing the session, it might very well be that somebody of you who has not spoken yet has, after having heard that, a real urgent statement for us. Can also be less urgent. So, who wants the floor? Siv?
I'm Siv Johansson, and as you heard, I was one engaged in writing the first application for the ERANET once upon a time, and I was also in the FOG in Kastrup when we suggested the name bonus for this new activity. And I've not been able to follow it, be engaged all the time, but I will follow it closely during the years. And I'm very happy, and I'm also very impressed for all this that has happened during these 10 years. I mean, all these engaged scientists with a special focus on young scientists, I must say, but also for this advisory group and the steering committee, all these gray-haired that have supported the development during the years. But most of all, Kaisa, to the Secretariat, and I will just give you a little gift for this. It's called living, and I think this is one of the things that really has been a factor of success. That is living mind, this openness and flexibility to always find new paths, new ways, exploring how can we improve this scientific cooperation, how can we further support science policy communication. Congratulations, Kaisa.
Thank you so much. And I must say that I feel embarrassed because my name has been mentioned too many times during these days. Because it's not me, it's Andris, it's Maija, it's Minna, it's Meelis and Tiina. It's a wonderful team.
Are there others who would like to have the floor? If not, I think Sif gave it a nice rounding here, so thank you for that. Before sending you half an hour late to lunch, there is some minor announcements, technical announcements, and that is, first of all, Andris would like to say some words.
Yeah, I forgot one thing, and this is addressing to coordinators and representatives of the project. We had the meeting yesterday afternoon, and I forgot to ask for participant list. I need it for the minutes. I'm putting this pad on the table there at the exit, and please leave your names and write which project you represent. Thanks.
That was all? Okay. Then I have one, and that is we would like to make a photo. The photo will be done directly outside of the meeting hall here right now. And a short announcement for the steering committee, due to the fact that we are half an hour late, we would postpone by a quarter. So steering committee meeting starts at 13:15. And do we need to inform where that is, Kaiser?
It's the next room. It's the next room from here.
Okay, that means I thank you very much for participation, all of you, and wish you a good lunch.